So we are rolling. Today is September 20th, 2018. We are at the house of Spiegelman?
It's Simon Spiegelman.
Simon Spiegelman on Park Avenue 10, right? Number 10 Park
Yes.
Avenue, Manhattan,
Yes.
New York, New York.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Your real name is Simon? Sai is a nickname.
Nickname is Sai.
Nickname is Sai.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sai, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born September 22, 1929. The reason I hesitate is because I was actually born, my birth certificate says I was born September 22nd. But my parents told me, and all my life, my childhood, that it was September 23rd because they never saw a birth certificate. I was born in Belgium, in Antwerp. All my documents say September 23rd, but I wasn't born on the 23rd. I was born on the 22nd.
On the 22nd of September.
Of September, 1929.
And you're born in Antwerp, Belgium.
Antwerp, Belgium.
Is that where your roots are from, or?
That's where my roots are from. Yeah, I was born there. But my roots are, my parents came from Poland.
Okay, they came from Poland.
They came from Poland to Germany, to France, and then they got kicked out in each country, but Belgium would admit them, and so they ended up in Belgium, and that's where I was born.
So when did they leave Poland, and where were they from in Poland?
They were in Poland from an area called Zagłębie, and the town where they lived, my parents lived, was Dąbrowa Górnicza, which is in the south of Poland.
So
20 miles.
Galicia? Is it Galicia?
No, Silesia.
Silesia.
It's Upper Silesia. And it's amazing to me today that my family, the Spiegelman family, lived in that district called Zagłębie. And there were different towns. Dąbrowa Górnicza was one of them. There was Sosnowiec, Będzin, and so on. The area was 20 miles from a place called Auschwitz.
Auschwitz.
But when they lived there, obviously.
Why did your parents leave Poland?
They left Poland to because of anti-Semitism. Basically, anti-Semitism. My grandfather was fired upon when he came home one day, going home, and they missed him. And the moment he came home and his wife told my grandmother, she said, "We got to get out of here." It was basically anti-Semitism, but my family, during the First World War, the Germans attacked. The Germans were in the area, and so were the Russians, and so were the Poles. The different Jews were supporting different nationalities. There were some Jews I thought considered them Polish, and they did, and some were German. In my family, they considered themselves Germans. And when the Austrians came to Dąbrowa Górnicza, my family supplied them with food and supplies and so on. So they became known as German collaborators.
Sympathizers.
And
so after the war, your family was.
And then my grandfather was picked, and they tried to shoot him.
They went from Poland to Germany.
They crossed the border. The border was between Poland and Germany. Was in that area. So they crossed the river and went across into Germany. When they got to Germany, my grandfather, because of his support to the Austrians, was known to a couple of bankers. And when they stopped them at the border, he gave their names. And those bankers came to the border and brought them into Germany. They escorted him and his wife, my grandmother, and their 6 children.
Are you the youngest child?
I wasn't.
You weren't born yet.
I wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
I wasn't born yet.
Okay.
This happened in 1920. 1924, probably. 1920, no, 1921 it must have been. 1921.
Hold on a second. So, your family arrives in Germany, and then they actually eventually move on to...
They settled in Germany, and then in 1928, because of the economic situation in Germany, which was horrible, the inflation.
Yeah, with the Weimar Republic, it was like inflation was like insane.
My grandfather owned a distributorship, a beer distributorship.
Beer?
Yeah, in Germany. Yeah, when he left Poland, they left with money. So he founded this distributorship, and they were doing very well. He also bought a house. His belief was that where you live, you should live in a big enough place so you can actually rent out apartments. And you occupy 1 or 2 apartments, you're there to watch the building and so on, and you got an income every month. And so my family always believed in that, and that's what they did. But with the bad economic situation, people couldn't pay their rent. He had a mortgage, and he had trouble with his mortgage. His people drank less. Business was bad, and they decided just to leave, and they headed for France.
For France.
And they settled in Metz, France. The French allowed them in, but a couple of days later they told them to leave. So they got kicked out of France. They left Metz.
Where's Metz?
Metz is in Alsace. It's near the German, Alsace-Lorraine, near the German border.
Sure. Which
so
in that time, Alsace is in French control.
It was French. Right. Yeah. Metz was French. Well, it had been German
and
too.
You guys went from there to your family went from.
Well,
there
I didn't. I wasn't born.
Right.
Then they went to Luxembourg because my grandfather had a cousin in Luxembourg who was doing very well, selling supplies to miners. Luxembourg was a big coal mining. They went there, didn't succeed. So then my grandmother and grandfather went to Antwerp because they had heard Antwerp was open, it was business, you could make a living. And that's how they landed in Antwerp. They left the children that they ranged in age from 12 to 18 or 19 in charge of a 19-year-old, which is always an amazing thing because I look at my grandchildren at the age of 19, and here there was this 19-year-old taking care of her sisters, or 4 sisters, taking them to school, cooking, feeding them. Well, but those were different days,
and your
different
parents,
times.
Your parents, and these are your
my father.
These are your father's parents.
My father. These are my parents. My grandparents, and they're very important in my story, because I was very close to them in the way they raised me. And my father stayed in Germany to dispose of the business. And my grandfather told him, I don't want to leave anybody without being paid. Every penny that we owe, we got to pay. Sell the house, sell the business, sell everything. And that's what he did. In the meantime, he and my mother had known each other because the families were very close. And they know each other well because every morning they would, during the bad days, during the recession, and they had to line up for bread, and they met at in the lineup in front of a bakery every morning. They got to know each other well.
Germany.
And this was still in Poland, Germany, of course. Germany. And then my father proposed to her, and they got married.
Are you the first child in your family?
Yeah, I have a sister. She's a year and a half younger.
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 So you're the eldest.
Yeah,
you're the eldest.
The 2 of us.
So
that's how we settled. Us and the family settled in Antwerp.
What kind of? So your father works for his father, basically. They're in business together. correct?
It was in Germany, yes.
What kind of business are they doing in Antwerp?
Ah, good question. Diamonds, of course.
Of course, yeah,
Because Antwerp was one of the diamond centers.
it still is.
And still not so. Yeah, it still is. Different people. The Jews are no longer as active in the business as now a lot of Russian people, well, also Russian Jews and Indians and so on. But my grandfather decided that he would sell tools, supplies. Antwerp was full of little shops that would be cutting diamonds and so on. And he went around from place to place and sold, the diamond, the loops, the pincers, tweezers, and all these little scales. And he got to know a lot of people in those shops, everybody in those shops. And while he was there, he picked up how to assess diamonds, and he learned the diamond trade just going around, and became a diamond broker on the exchange. When my father came, my father married at the time, and they went on a honeymoon in Berlin, or where I was conceived. No, I was conceived in Berlin, and 9 months later, I was born in Antwerp, and they then went to Antwerp. So, my father also became a broker.
Okay. So your father and your grandfather are quite close. They work together.
They both were diamond brokers.
Diamond brokers. And your sister's born a year and a half later.
Yeah, and also in Antwerp.
Hold on a second. Is there any way, because...
Yeah. If I'm going too much into details...
I'm asking you about these details.
Details.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
All right.
I'm just trying to figure out right now if the sound is bothering us.
Okay. Dad, the details make it so interesting. It's like watching a movie. I'm loving it. Like just the little shops in Antwerp. That's such a great detail.
Okay. All right. I just want to know, because I can kind of cut things and make it a little condensed. But you guys have to tell me.
One more thing, Josh. What if I put it right here? Coming from here, maybe it's around the corner. One more try, and I can move out of there.
Oh no, but if your father, he's fine. I'm the one who's like.
No, but just maybe it'll come out to you.
It's okay. I just need a napkin or something.
Okay. Or do you want a towel?
You want a wet towel?
Your own towel.
I'm in the schwitz room. It's okay. It's fine. I would prefer to sweat my.
Would you like a glass of real cold water with ice in it?
No, I'll get some ice water. Yeah. Well, you
ice water. I think.
Do this quietly. Yeah. No, it's the film business. We can't hear everything. The microphones are too strong. They're too
well.
big.
So your family's in the diamond business.
Yes.
Would you say that you guys are like upper middle class? You guys are okay.
Well, upper middle class.
Upper middle class.
Yeah.
You guys are doing well. Are you? What year do you stay in Antwerp until? Until what year? Thank you, my dear.
Until 1941. Okay. That is what the Germans came in, 1940.
No, the Germans came in 1940, that's correct. So I want to ask you about your your childhood in Antwerp.
Yeah.
You go to a Hebrew school?
I went to the Tachkamoni, which is a Jewish school in Antwerp. And half of the day was English and half the day was English. What am I talking about?
Flemish.
Flemish, of course. Flemish, and then half the day was Hebrew, Jewish religion, the Talmud, Torah.
Did you live in a Jewish neighborhood?
We lived in a Jewish neighborhood, yes. We did. My grandparents did not. They bought a house in Beckham, which was a Gentile, mostly Gentile. It was sporadic with a few Jews in there, which of course made a difference later on when the Germans started going after the Jews. But we lived in a Jewish neighborhood. So, now my schooling was half Jewish and half Flemish. My family thought if we're going to live in Belgium, I should go to the Belgian public school. And it was logical. They said, first of all, you're in the network of friends, Belgian friends. Takamoni were all Jewish kids. So he said, you don't have any chance that you'll end up in the diamond business like all those kids ever would. So I went to a Belgian public school where there were very few Jews in that entire school. I left the Takamoni. They took me out of the Takamoni.
How old were you when they took you out of there?
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade.
I had excellent grades because I still, a teacher got in touch with me from Takamoni. He found me and then told me, you know what? You were an A student at Takamoni. I have it right here. It says Simon Spiegelman in the first grade and second grade, tops. So he said, so we talked.
Do you remember hearing news about what's going on in neighboring Germany before the war? Kristallnacht, Munich?
We heard, we more than that, we heard Hitler's speeches on the radio. We'd be sitting in my grandparents' house. The family would get together every Sunday for lunch without fail. Everybody had to show up. And once or twice, they were listening to Hitler, raving and ranting, and I sat with them. There must have been about 10, 12 people, more, maybe 20 people right there listening to him. And I could see fear, I could sense it. And then my grandma came in and she said, okay, enough of this nonsense. The table is served, and she had cake and on the table, and cakes and nuts and fruit. Everybody went into. And then she said, "It doesn't. This too will pass. We've had those guys. We've had those people before." But one of my uncles was very smart, and he said, "This is not the usual." He said, "They're going to come after us, and." I think we should leave the country. And there was no war yet, at that time. It was in the 30s. Yeah. So she said,
This was your father's brother?
So she said, no, my aunt's, my aunt's husband.
Okay.
Yeah. And his name was Meyer Lieber. And he and his wife left soon thereafter. And managed to immigrate to Brazil, and from Brazil to Colombia, and from Colombia to the United States. But he was the first to leave. And everybody else, nobody else took Hitler seriously.
Nobody else took Hitler seriously because everybody thought that Hitler was,
They said that we've had
just a German internal thing.
That's right.
Right?
Well, exactly. That all this was propaganda to get to be elected, to be liked. And but he would not carry through with what he said. But he said, if there will be war, I remember, if there is war, the Jews will suffer. We will get even with the Jews. He said the Jews are planning this. The Jews they control the industry. They control politics, and he threatened the Jews. Nobody in my family, only one person really took it seriously. That was my uncle. My uncle.
And he got out.
He got out and came to the United States.
Now let's talk about. You're 10 years old when World War II breaks out.
I was, 11,
years old, right?
11. Yeah, 11 years old. Oh, well, okay, 11.
What year are you born? 29.
29.
Right, 39. It breaks out in 39.
Yeah, 19.
You're exactly.
Oh, yeah, but
exactly
not in Belgium. In Belgium, it was 1940.
Belgium was 1940, but the war breaks out in
Poland.
With Poland, yeah, it breaks out. Now your parents are Polish.
We didn't. We listened to the radio. At that time, the families would sit at the radio and listen to the news. And I remember my mother, when she heard about the war and what was going on, she sat crying. And I think she got in a state of depression because I would see her sitting at the table with letters of her family, old letters that she got before the war. And we very quickly found out that what the Germans were doing. When they entered Germany, they first entered the area where they came from. It's like the Zagłębie area. That's where the attack took place.
On the radio station.
On the radio station.
Yeah.
And then they claimed that the Poles had attacked the Germans.
Of course.
And then they came and they attacked. And the first thing, within a couple of days, they started burning the synagogues. The synagogue in Katowice.
In Katowice. And your grandmother is, you remember seeing her?
Yeah, well, they talked about it all the time. That was a topic of conversation. At the time, we didn't have email, television, nothing. It was mostly word of mouth. People were listening to the BBC a lot. They listened to Berlin on shortwave, to Berlin radio, and they would listen to Berlin radio about the victories.
What happens when the Germans enter Brussels and Antwerp?
Well, on May 10, 1940, they bombed Antwerp.
Do you remember it?
Very clear, very clearly. I was sleeping and I heard this big noise, and I get up, and my father sitting at the radio listening to shortwave, and I hear the bombs falling outside. None of them fell in our neighborhood because they were bombing the port. Yeah. And I went over and asked my father. He didn't want to talk to me, but I listened on the radio. They were playing the national anthem, and patriotic. Oh, the Germans attack, but we will beat them. Our troops are on the line. They won't get very far. Well, anyway, within 2 days they broke through. Not only did they come through the border of Germany, they came around through France and around the Ardennes. And the Belgians thought, they'll do the same thing they did in 1914. We know how they're going to do it. Well, they didn't do it. They come in a roundabout way where nobody expected them to be. And when we had heard what had happened in Poland, and my family decided to leave, and we hoped to get to the sea.
What do you guys pack everything
to Calais, and then get a boat and go across to England. Or if that didn't work, to head south towards Paris, figuring the French will never give up Paris. They'll fight to the death for their capital. Well,
that didn't happen.
And that didn't happen.
No.
So we got.
Your family?
So we got as far as the sea. But the Germans.
Wait a minute, Si. You guys pack up the house and go? Is that basically what happens?
Yeah, we packed up. Didn't pack up the house. No, we didn't. We just we didn't even have suitcases. My uncle was able to buy a van, an old van, and all of us, there were 10. He didn't know how to drive the van. The guy that sold him the car showed him how to do it. He said, "This is the brake," and they didn't. It wasn't automatic at the time. There was a clutch, and you move the thing, and to start the car, you get in front there, and you get it going. And my uncle put us in the car, told us to get a couple of things in a rucksack or bag or whatever, and he said, in a couple of days we'll be back. And we took off. He was driving, and then he almost went into a ditch. And
your parents are with you also?
My grandparents, my parents, all my aunts, my dad, and we were in the van didn't have any seats. So what he did, he went somewhere and he found two benches, these long benches, and put them into the van. And we were sitting on those benches. And as he was making turns, accelerating, we were sliding all over. My grandma screaming. Today you kind of laugh at it.
It sounds so nostalgic.
Yes,
it was traumatic.
It was traumatic. It was traumatic. But you know what? I was a kid, 11. I thought in my stupid head, I thought it was fun. And my uncle saying, the Germans will get beaten, they'll run back to Germany, and we're coming.
In a few days.
In a few days, and we're coming back. In the meantime, we're going to the shore. We're going to Ostend, and we're going to be near the beach. And here, my mind, I thought, oh my God, this is the summer. This is
spring.
It's May. It's spring.
Yeah,
May.
Yeah.
Well, because in Belgium it's cold in May.
Yeah.
But hey, we're gonna be on the shore. Well, we got as far as the pond, then we found out the boats no longer are running to England, and we're stuck. And the Germans are behind, are coming around, they're already cutting us off. They're coming into France. And so it became serious. The Germans were dropping parachutists over the pond. And the French and the Belgians were panic-stricken soldiers. So my grandfather, my family have blue eyes, my aunts, my dad, blue eyes, and we heard that the French were arresting people in the street, men that looked German, or had blue eyes, or blonde. So they told everybody, the rumor was, if you're blonde, just dye your hair, make it black, dark. And some people did, but when they were arrested, many of them were summarily shot as spies. So the panic in the pond. We left the pond in the van and went into France with the idea of getting to Calais, Boulogne, that area, where we, and in the meantime, am I getting into too much detail? You want to?
Everything's fine, son. Everything's perfect.
The Poles,
French.
the French, and the British had declared war on Germany because they have an agreement with Poland. If Poland gets attacked,
Sure.
the French and
The dummy war.
and the French and the British would stand by Poland, and they sent an expeditionary force.
Yeah,
It was huge. It was huge. Into France.
Dunkirk.
The expeditionary force came to the border, to the Belgian-German border, but they got defeated in the small battles. They retreated. But I don't know if you would call it retreated. They were surrounded. The Germans were just coming everywhere.
Oh yeah. It was called Blitzkrieg.
That's right.
The Blitzkrieg.
And they had their,
Blitzkrieg.
with the Stuka planes bombing,
You remember those
machine
noises?
gunning the road. We were on the road when they were machine gunning us. Yeah. My mother, we would jump, on the road in France. The two Stuka planes came down and started machine gunning the road. The road, there were not many soldiers there. It was mostly civilians, but they created panic. And when they created panic, people were running on all the roads, and the military, the British Expeditionary Force, couldn't come to help. And the French, they couldn't move there. They had their units. They had a large army, but they couldn't move their units to fight the Germans. When the Stukas came on the road that we were on, we jumped out of the van and threw ourselves into a ditch. And my mother and in between my sister and me. And the Stuka came down and started machine gunning the road, and debris was flying everywhere. It was falling on us. They were, so I looked up. I wanted to see that plane. And my mother took my head and shoved it into the earth.
Remember the noise
Don't
that it
look
made,
up.
the plane?
I still, of course I can hear it. I hear the machine gunning as they came down. No civilians got killed or hurt. French soldiers were so demoralized that an officer and a sergeant crawled underneath our van. They threw their rifles down and crawled underneath our van. the officer someone took off his kepi, that his beautiful kepi, threw it away, and they crawled. And they were, I don't know if they did this deliberately, but there were lots of horses and cows dead in the fields. Why were they shooting animals? And I don't know. Create more panic? I don't know. So what was the idea? Well, so we got off the main road, we got to little roads, and that's where the Germans caught up with us. And I remember the day that I saw the first German. The patrol came, there were motorcycles, and they had, one guy was riding the motorcycle, another guy was sitting on the sidecar with a machine gun. And we heard the Germans were coming, and so on the radio we heard it, but no, it wasn't the radio. I don't. Somehow we knew they were not far away. We ran into a cafe on the road, and so did dozens of others. And we went there and waited for the Germans. And they came. When they came, it was a patrol. There were about three or four of these motorcycles, and we were inside that cafe. And me, always wanted to see what's going on. I look out the window, and I see the guy lifts his hands, and he looks at the cafe, and then some of the people, women and with children, panicked, and they ran out and ran to the back of the cafe because the guy had his German soldier had his machine gun trained on us on the building. Apparently when he saw this was all civilians, women and children running out, he put his glasses on and says, "Forward." And this is how they moved on. So this was the first encounter with the Germans. Then we ended up in a small village called Fruge. And the Germans had occupied Fruge already when we got there. My family did not want to stay in Fruge amongst the Germans, so my aunt found a farmer who would hide us. And he would hide us. He had an annex, a hayloft and an annex, and there were a dozen of us. There was a whole family, and we went into hiding. And a couple of days later, who shows up? A German squad with a lieutenant, and he talks to the farmer and tells him that the soldiers are going to stay on the farm. They will be staying there. They will be fed there. The Germans will bring them food, and but they won't harm anybody. These were regular soldiers, Wehrmacht, regular soldiers. The lieutenant was one of the high, with the high boots and clicking and all. But for 10 days we lived with the Germans, maybe 2 weeks. We lived in the house, and the Germans took over the hayloft, and we saw them every day. They didn't know that we were Jewish, obviously. But these were regular army people.
Wehrmacht.
Wehrmacht. Yeah. They were not Gestapo, they were not the SS. Yeah. My grandfather was praying every morning. He's standing in front of a window. On one Sunday, they're playing football out there. They had the day off, right? During the week, they were doing guard duty. They were into the town and so on. They kick the ball hits the shutters fly open. There stands my grandfather on a Sunday, stands with the tefillin and a talis. He's saying the morning prayer. And I said, "Oh my God!" And I remember that picture. And these guys, one of them, the youngest, he couldn't have been more than 19 or so on. Many of the others were older, and some of them were in their 30s or 40s. So that's why they were doing occupation duty. And he goes over, closes the shutters, and said in German, he says to my grandfather, "Opa," grandpa, "hab keine Angst." don't be scared, he said. Aber pass auf die Schwarze, the blacks. Be careful of the blacks. The blacks were the SS. They were in black uniforms. With them Totenkopf, with the dead head on them. He said,
skeleton.
And they continued playing. That had an effect on them. We said, well, maybe the Germans are not so bad. Maybe all these are rumors, what's happening in Poland. It's just propaganda. And soon thereafter, we went back to Antwerp.
You went back to Antwerp?
Yep. We went back to Antwerp.
And?
And that was in 1940. That was in 1940 in the summer. August 1940, the schools, we heard rumors, business is good, schools are opening, the Germans made announcements in French and Flemish. Everything is calm. Oh, by that time, this was in June, after June, because Paris fell sometime at the end of by the third week in June. Yeah, when Paris fell and of course, now I remember why we went back. The French surrendered. The armistice, where Hitler went to Paris and it took the surrender of and the Belgian king had also surrendered.
No, he ran away. He ran away to England.
No, not the Belgian king.
No? No,
the Belgian king after the war was suspected to be a collaborator. He did not. You think of the Dutch queen. She and the entire government went to London. The Belgians did not. They stayed put. Don't forget, the Belgian queen was German. She came from a German family. So the Flemish thought, well, gee whiz, we got a queen. But the Germans, they're going to be good to us because of the queen. So did many Jews. Well, it didn't. The queen did some good things. She might have saved a couple of dozen Jews, but they had to be Belgian nationals. It wouldn't done us any good. We were not Belgian national. We were immigrants.
Yeah.
In Belgium, you had to apply for. It was just like the United States.
So when do you guys leave Antwerp and how?
Well, we came to Antwerp, and I went back to school. My father went back to business, and in the diamond business, diamonds were hot because there were people. The Germans were very clever. At first, they were very. They didn't touch the Jews, didn't touch anybody. They were just there. Little by little, they started to implement these edicts. Jews were not allowed to have government jobs. Jews were not allowed to be managers of big companies. Jews had to turn in their radios. Jews there was a curfew. Jews could not be in the streets after 7.
Did you guys have a yellow star?
That happened after we left. No, at that time there was no yellow star. Jews were, at that time, they started to be sent out for labor to outside on farms. They were well fed. Came back to Antwerp and told everybody, hey, look what happened. They send us to work on the farms, and now they send us back, and the Germans are not so bad. But in the meantime, their word was put tightening the screws. And then they started sending people to Poland.
When did you guys get out?
We got out in August, in 1941. In August of 1941, a year and a couple of months, we were under the German occupation.
Do you remember anything particular?
I remember, that I was almost killed by a German, right in front of our house. He was drunk. I was coming back from playing in the park with a bunch of guys, and the German is walking drunk on the sidewalk, on our sidewalk. And he, in a swagger, the people that were coming towards him all went off the sidewalk into the gutter. And me, being a kid, decided I was going to walk towards him. Well, anyway, he came, as he came past me, he hit me and I flew up on the trolley tracks. And he comes over to me and he takes out his dagger. And I thought, I was in panic, lying there. My luck, a trolley came. And I was on the trolley track, so he stopped. And the people in the trolley, because the windows were open at the time, that was in the summer, people saw what was happening. The conductor started clanking. People were yelling out to him, let that kid go, what are you doing? They were yelling at him, and this guy, all of a sudden, he sees there are witnesses here, but he had his dagger right there, right here. I felt that point, and all he had to do was just, and I remembered it, and it's something I remembered all my life, and I still remember that today. There are nights when I wake up, I can't sleep, and this thing comes to me. My father, in the meantime, was arrested by the Gestapo. And that's a story too. He was in the Diamond Dealers Club in the evening, and he left, and the Gestapo, some of the Gestapo people were waiting for diamond dealers to come out, and then would arrest them but make a deal with them because they were carrying their diamonds. At the time, they wouldn't leave them, and the Diamond Dealers Club, the Club Diamantaire, it was the exchange, the diamond exchange. They had places where diamond dealers would leave their diamonds, not to walk in the streets, but they wouldn't do that anymore. Well, this German tried to make a deal with my father. Give me, I know you have diamonds on you. You give me your diamonds, otherwise I arrest you. He said, I'm arresting you as a Jew. And he was waiting for the trolley. The trolley came, and my father jumped on the trolley. As he came by, the Gestapo guy goes after him, and as the trolley was moving, as he was grabbing with both hands to get on the trolley, my father kicked him, and he rolled off. But my father got hurt, and he had a big wound, but he wouldn't go to the hospital. We didn't know whether they had his, whether they were looking for him. My aunt found out, because she had a close friend in the Belgian police station, said that they had some kind of description of a terrorist who had actually thrown a German Gestapo off. So my mother said, we got to get out of here. My grandmother found out about it, and she came. She was pleading with my father, you got to go. So the next day, 2 days later, we put on 2 or 3 layers of clothes and went to and left. We didn't have any papers. You didn't have the Ausweis. You needed a document to travel, which was issued by the Germans. And we walked over. My father said, we're going to the train station. When you go past the Belgian police, the Antwerp police, and the Germans, just be happy, smile as if you're going on a holiday. So we did that. And we go right past the German, past the Antwerp police, and they don't check us because they were stopping people and checking their documents. We get on the train and we head to Brussels. In Brussels, my father had a childhood friend. Cymbalista was his name. And we couldn't stay in a hotel because the hotel you had to show ID. So he put us up. And I remember that evening, he was a wealthy man. He was a manufacturer of raincoats. He was very wealthy. So he had a cook, and she prepared a big meal for us. He took out a bottle of cognac, and he was an amateur violin player, and he played violin for us. They were all drinking the cognac, and the next day, he arranged for his driver, because we didn't want to walk the streets because they were checking people. His friend
is Jewish?
Cymbalista was Jewish. Yeah. Eventually, we met him again. He came to New York. He might have family here, come to think of it. He must have children, grandchildren.
His driver drives you guys where?
To the train station. The driver was not Jewish. So he comes with us and he leads us to, and he buys the tickets. So we bought tickets to, from Brussels to Paris. Yeah, it was from Paris. We went on the train, and we were so lucky because there was the Gestapo and the Belgian police checking papers everywhere. And we walked to the train and didn't get stopped. They were checking, and we walked. And I remember my grandfather, my dad, and said, just smile, smile. I have a big smile. You and Cecile, my sister, just joke, make jokes, even if you don't feel like it, and laugh. We did. And so we got on this train. The train also was checked at different places. They didn't check us. And we ended up in Paris. So we ended up in Paris, and this was in 1941, August. Maybe it was, yeah, it must have been August. And at that time, the Germans were rounding up the Jews in Paris. The Jewish neighborhood was just full of them, full of French police, and the Germans rounding up Jews. Luckily, we got into a taxi, and again, we didn't get checked, and we went into a hotel that my uncle had arranged for us to stay. My uncle at that time was in the underground, the French underground. He was in the Belgian underground and the French, both my uncle and my aunt. So they knew these places. And where they put us was at the top floor of a bordello that the Germans frequented. And during the night, I remember there was laughing, and the German boots, because they had hobnail boots, and then they walked those steps, you could hear them running up and going down, and the women giggling about a week.
And from there, where'd you guys go?
We crossed the border into what was unoccupied France, Vichy France, and we had a guide. His name was Weiss, I remember Weiss, and he took us to the border. It took us a couple of days because we had to. And it
was just the four of you?
No, but we thought there was the four of us, but by the time we got to the place where we were, to the border, there were between 20 and 30 children, some infants, and we had to cross between towers. In the middle of the night, we walked and walked and walked because we couldn't there was no way to ride or drive, and we managed to, he told us, slide and when you get to the other side, somebody will wait for you.
This is the border with Spain?
No. This was the border with free, unoccupied France, Vichy France. It was around, later on, I'm assuming it was Poitiers, was the place where we ended up. And walking across, from there we walked to the other side. At that time we were in the hands of several guides who were doing this for money and taking us across. There were infants, and the fathers strapped the infants on their backs with their belts, and they crawled. Luckily, we all made it. The Germans were in those towers with machine guns. So that's how we got to unoccupied France, and from there, we managed to get to the nearest towns and ended up in Nice. And from Nice, we made our way to Spain. Nice is not far from the Spanish border. But we found out that a lot of people were doing that. They took the shortest path. So we went over we took a train to the Atlantic, and we crossed the border there. When we crossed the border into Spain, we were immediately arrested at the border and put in jail. So the four of us were sitting in jail for hours and hours and hours. My father luckily had a visa to Cuba, which he luckily managed to it was smart enough.
Where did he obtain it?
In Brussels.
In Brussels, yeah.
He paid good money for it, obviously. He paid off the Cuban officials for those. And the Spanish officials, the reason we crossed over there is because it was the Basque country and they didn't like Franco. And we thought they would really be sympathetic to Jewish refugees, but they weren't. No, they didn't. But he didn't believe that this was a true visa that was valid. So he checked and then we were sitting there, we thought we'd never get out of jail. And all of a sudden, this old rusty door opens up, and a Spanish gendarme, they wore these black, funny hats. I said, ustedes, vengan conmigo, come with me. And we went to the officer in charge, and he said, you're free. You can go I'll give you papers, you can stay in Spain for 30 days. But within the 30 days, you've got to get out of here, find a ship, and go to Cuba. And so my father found a ship. We were in Spain for probably 2 weeks, and we found an old rusty ship that was a cattle ship. It would take cattle between Tangiers and Spain. The company that owned the ship had built bunkers inside in the hole where they had the animals, and they packed 800 people, 800 refugees on this ship going to Cuba. And 3 toilets. The rest of the people had to use makeshift kind of toilets on deck. It took us a month, 3 weeks, a month, to get to Cuba. And this is how we escaped. This is how we saved our lives. In the meantime, once we got to Cuba, we had no knowledge what happened. Later on, we found out that my grandparents were arrested and were shipped to Auschwitz. My aunt and uncle survived. They were in the underground. He was a sergeant in the Maquis, and she was a courier carrying messages. So they survived. My family in Germany and in Poland did not.
Hold on, wait.
Sorry. I want to show you.
What would you want to do? Because you got a microphone connected to you, so I want you to...
Can you get me the book? My story. No. Is this a good? I'm sorry. I forgot that I was being filmed.
It's okay. It's a good sign.
You get me so involved into.
That's okay.
I just want to show you. This is my grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather. This is my great-grandfather, Chaim Leib. He had eight children right up here. You can see these were his children, grandchildren, before the war. This is a result of the Holocaust. The blanks are gone. It's amazing. This is my line here, and we all survived right here. My line. This is my grandfather. Right here is my grandfather. This is my dad and his sister. And now below that, you have their children, you have their wives. When I look at this, I see, when you can't imagine, you're talking about 6 million. You can't conceive the meaning of 6 million. You can't, it's just a number. But when you start looking at this and these names, and seeing what you see, the extent of the horror. So we end up in Cuba. And tried to get to the United States. It took us a couple of years, and then we made it to the United States.
How was it in Cuba?
Cuba was wonderful for us. My father managed to set up a diamond business.
So did all your father, huh?
So did the Bel.
He's a real macher, huh?
Yeah. So did many Belgians who came, you know, and they did business with New York. So they set up diamond polishing plants, polished diamonds. I came from New York or from London.
Did you go to school in Cuba?
I went to school in Cuba. Yeah, I learned Spanish.
Where?
To the Cuban high school, Instituto de La Habana, it was called. Yeah.
Any Jewish life there? Any Jewish community there? Or?
Very much so, because for us, the refugees from Belgium, it was like the movie Casablanca. We were still European. In fact, in the beginning, the Belgian men would walk around in this heat of the tropics with suit and tie and jacket. It took a while before they started to realize you don't have to wear a suit. You just wear thin slacks and a jacket and a shirt.
Life was wonderful for Jews in Cuba. I grew up in Cuba. I came from Poland at age 3. I grew up in Cuba and stayed there until it was time to come to college here. Life was wonderful. We didn't know about anti-Semitism or anything.
I interviewed a guy named Morduk. Oh, I can't remember his last name. I interviewed him in Miami a while ago. He was on the Altalena ship. But he was a Jew from Havana.
Yeah.
He was in Beitar in Havana.
Where?
Beitar was the organization.
He was like
it was a militant organization. I know them. Yeah.
He told me a lot about the life of Jews in Cuba.
It was a wonderful life.
Wonderful childhood.
It was a wonderful life.
I went to a private Methodist school, religious Methodist.
You know.
Anti-Semitic. They
No.
They knew I was Jewish, and yet there was no.
Yeah.
You know, within Machal, we had a dozen volunteers from Cuba.
Well, this guy was one of them.
Yeah, what was his name?
Morduk.
That's,
I forget his last name. I can find out in a second. But he was 18 years old and 48, and he came.
yeah, we were that age. Yeah.
He was Machal recruited from Havana.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, Begin came to Havana, and they were his bodyguards.
I know. Yeah.
And this guy, Morduk, was on the Altalena when his friend died in his arms.
It was a horror. It was a terrible.
We're going to get to that in a sec.
That was a terrible episode.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was not Beitar. I was with the Bnei Akiva, the religious organization.
In Havana.
In Havana.
You were in.
That's how I became a Zionist.
Okay, so let's get to that. So you're in Havana. You're in Cuba. You made this crazy journey out of Europe. You were saved. Your mother, father, your sister, and you're in Havana. You get there, what, 1942?
That was 1941. 1941. Yeah, 1941.
You get to Havana, Cuba?
In November 1941.
And I'm sure you remember it. You're looking at like these palm trees. It's like paradise.
It was a paradise.
Yeah.
The Cuban people, happy people.
Yeah.
They love to dance.
Yeah.
They welcome you.
Yeah.
That was just amazing. I love the Cubans. I still do today. Cuban people.
So and how old are you now? You're 12. Where's your bar mitzvah? Where do you have your bar mitzvah?
In Havana, in 1942. I had my bar mitzvah 1 month before my grandparents were taken to Auschwitz.
Let me tell you about Cubans. They called us Polacos,
Polish Jews.
All the Jews were called Polacos. But they liked us. Why? Because the Jews gave a lot of jobs to Cubans.
Yeah. This guy told me about a sausage factory in Havana. Something about a sausage factory.
Well, Jews opened up the diamond. The diamonds were huge because there were 30 factories. They taught the diamond, they had to, but by law, teach the Cubans. You could open a factory if half of your employees were Cubans,
right.
and you taught them to polish diamonds.
Right.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So
You know.
who teaches you for your bar mitzvah?
A rabbi who had been my teacher in the Tachkamoni.
In Belgium?
In Belgium, yeah, and he escaped to Cuba.
There was a synagogue in
yeah.
Cuba. I mean, a Jewish
There were several synagogues.
organization.
And how did
Yeah.
you get involved with Bnei Akiva?
It was because it was the Jewish, all the Belgians kind of were clung together.
Right.
They clung together, the Belgians. So my friends were all Belgian emigres, and one of the leaders, the older one, one of the older ones, means 20, 21, had been in the Mizrahi. So it was natural that he gathered all of us together, and our parents were, of course, wanted us to go because they gave us a Saturday. We used to meet on Saturday afternoon. That gave them Saturday afternoon and quiet. Nobody was in the house.
Right.
So they loved it. And we would meet and we would sing Zionist songs, study Jewish history, and talk about Palestine, Israel.
And this was like once a week?
Palestine.
Once a week, twice a week?
Every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
Afternoon.
Every Saturday.
After lunch we would meet. And then after we had an organized session, then we would all go for walks on the Malecon, on the waterfront. On Sunday we would meet informally, a couple of people, buddies. I had a clique of, some 6, 7 guys. And we would go out and go do things. Later on Saturday evening, we would go to a movie together, all of us, boys, girls. And we were really believed that there should be, well, when we found out about the Holocaust, it was already 2 or 3 years later.
What year does your family leave Havana? What year?
We left Havana in 1946.
Okay. So from 41 to 46, you're in Havana, Cuba.
5 years.
Right? You're in Havana, Cuba, 5 years. So you basically are a teenager well, you're 16 when you leave, right? 16? No.
I was 16.
16, 17 years old.
No, I was 16 when I left, exactly.
16 years old. So you're like, and this whole time that you're in Cuba, you're in Bnei Akiva. That's your kind of frame. Is that correct?
Yes.
When it comes to Zionism.
Yes.
To your education.
Yes, and we were taught that because what happened in Europe, we've got to live in Israel. And the kibbutz life is what, at that time, was the only possibility.
Bnei Akiva is under the umbrella of the Haganah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And what we were taught, Torah ve'avodah, exactly, and we were taught that our life belonged on a kibbutz, in a settlement, on the border, and the ideal person, the Bnei Akiva person, was a person with a plow and a rifle.
Right.
You defend the land, you plow the land, you work the land.
And you study.
Torah v'avodah, and you study, and you believe it.
Do you know who the head of Bnei Akiva was in Cuba at that time, or do you remember?
There was no Bnei Akiva at the time. We were not called Bnei Akiva.
What were you called?
There was a Banativ.
Manativ.
Banativ, which means on the way.
On the way, Banativ.
Banativ.
On the route.
On the route. And the route was Israel. There was no Israel.
Of course.
It was Palestine. It was Palestine.
Of course.
See, that's what a lot of people don't understand when you talk about Palestinians. The people who lived in Palestine could have been Jewish Palestinians. They could have been Arab Palestinians. The British are the ones who set this up. Of course, Palestine was invented by the Romans because they wanted to get even with the Jews who rebelled.
Right.
And when we lost the temple and lost the country, of course, they wanted to really rub it in and said it's Palestine.
So Cuba's good place for you at the time when you were there, when you were a teenager.
It was a wonderful place. Yeah. Yeah, it was a wonderful place.
And of course, you're getting updates of what's going on in the war.
Not really. But what happened to the Jews was not known.
Right. It was that what came out after.
We knew what was happening when the invasion, the invasion of Africa, the invasion of Africa, the invasion of Italy, and all. We knew there was a Jewish brigade that was fighting in Italy. That we did know. We had a couple of members, the older members, who went to Canada and volunteered in the Canadian Army from Cuba.
From Jews who went from Cuba to the Canadian Royal Army.
Canadian Royal Army, and I went to Europe.
To Europe, or Africa, Sicily.
Yeah.
So,
but we didn't know. It was.
What does Simon want to do? What's his plan? What's
Me?
your plan? Yeah, when you're like
dreaming.
You're like. You know,
I was a Zionist. I was dreaming that someday I will go help establish the Jewish state.
What are your parents
in Palestine? My parents
think? Yeah.
Didn't take me seriously.
They didn't, huh?
You know, a 16-year-old kid is just talking. I was very much anti-British because the British wouldn't let the Holocaust survivors come into. So three of us went out at night, late at night, with a bucket of paint.
Three of us.
Two close friends.
Okay.
They all ended up in Israel later on. We went up. One of them got a bucket of paint. I managed to get a brush from the superintendent of the building, and at 1 or 2 in the morning, we went out to the British Legacy in Vedado, and we painted with big letters in Spanish, Los Británicos afuera de Palestina. British, get out of Palestine. And I think about it now. Kids,
How old were you?
15.
15?
15-year-old. We snuck out of the house. My parents were good sleepers. So I managed to sneak out when they were sleeping and managed to come back when they were still sleeping and went to bed. The British papers at the time, I wish I could get a hold of the Cuban papers, had pictures of the sign, and they said, and the headline said, the conflict in the Middle East has reached Cuba. I can look this up, and then I gotta go to the library here and find this.
And nobody found out who it was.
Nobody found out, but the Cuban police at that time were patrolling. They didn't see us. We were lucky. They would have seen 3 kids wandering around. They would have stopped us.
2 o'clock in the morning.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, but we were smart enough to actually split right away. So we each ran home, and I was running home. Because I thought I was looking behind me. Maybe somebody from the British consulate is coming. I could have been arrested.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would have been in jail. I would have been a big scandal. A 15-year-old.
So you guys get to the United States in 1946?
Yes.
Cuba?
In 1946, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where do you guys end up?
We ended up in New York, living in Kew Gardens, in Queens. Queens. So I went back to high school to finish high school. It turned out that I had to have at that time, I had to get some Regents credits.
What kind of passport do you have?
Passport?
Yeah, are you a citizen of any country?
Me, when? Then?
Yeah.
No, we were...
Refugees.
We were refugees. No, we were not. We were not. But...
Hold on a second. Hold on. I want to... So, Sai, you guys finally get your papers. You come to the United States. You end up in Queens. Totally different environment from Cuba.
But you know, ironically, the moment we arrived in Cuba, my father went to the consulate. It was in November, the end of November. He went to the American consulate and applied. And he said he would get you had to get an affidavit, you had to get, well, anyway, kinds of information. But the official at the consulate said, you have no chance of getting to the United States until the war is, until the things are settled in Europe. And the reason why is you're a refugee, and it's just as like you said, well, you have no nationality. How do we know you're not a German spy? How do we know that you're not a German spy?
So how did your father,
or a saboteur?
Yeah, how did your father get permission to come into the United States in 1956?
Well, we waited in Havana. We decided, they told us you don't have a chance. Then, a week later was December 7th. We arrived November 24th, December 7th, Pearl Harbor.
You're already in Cuba.
And we're in Cuba.
America's in the war.
And there's a war. And nobody could, and the United States, we heard, won't admit anybody now to arrive in the United States. So we gave up. And we knew we would have to stay in Cuba till the end of the war, which we did. And then when the war was over, my father applied again, and he was told, you know, you're going to have trouble coming to the United States. And I said, why? How do we know you're not a Russian spy? How do you're not a communist? So my father said, look, I have a business. I've been here 5 years.
Capitalist.
I'm a capitalist. Am I going to be a communist? God. Well, eventually, some of my mother's relatives who lived in them got to their congressman, and who went to bat for us, and that's how we got the immigration papers.
So you arrive in Queens, you're 16 years old, you're in high school. You're still thinking about Palestine, or it's in the past?
Oh, more so than ever.
Explain to me.
And it must have been in 1944, 1943 is when we started hearing about the concentration camps. We had no idea. We heard rumors of what was going on in Poland, that they were surrounding Jews and shooting them. And but Auschwitz, we didn't know. Nobody knew. Then the information started coming through in 1943, 44. Pictures were coming back to us because Auschwitz was liberated. I think it was in January 1943. So these pictures were coming back, and now we started to realize we didn't know the numbers. And I remember that one Saturday afternoon, one of the leaders, they call them a madrich, made it in Cuba, and it was when we had the meeting of the Bonnetti. This is, as I said, it was part of the Bnei Akiva today. And he said, "There's terrible news that we should remember, and we believe the talk is that 600,000 Jews were killed in Europe so far." 600,000. Then, oh my God, it was terrible news. And our parents found out about it. Then, a couple of weeks later, the same madrich came and he said, I hear that the number 600,000 is wrong. So when I heard that, I said, oh, might have been 6,000. He made a mistake. 6 million. Nobody believed it. 6 million. One of my good friends, who was one of the painters at the English consulate, was good with math, and he came up that if you take 6 million people and you put them standing side by side, he said the line will go, and he pointed 2 points from Havana all the way up to the North Pole, and we came up with some kind of a number. And
what happens when you get to the United States with your activity? So you get to the States, it's 46, 47.
40, yeah.
Right? How do you get involved with Machal in the United States, in New York?
I got involved with Machal through one of the shlichim. At the time, it was in 1948 to 1947, the United Nations voted for the state of Israel.
Right. You're here in New York.
I was here in New York. We were all in the street in front of the Manhattan Center, right here on 34th Street and 8th Avenue, and dancing and carrying on.
54th Street?
34th Street.
What was that?
Manhattan Center.
What is that?
That's right here on my street.
But where's the Manhattan Center? What is the Manhattan Center?
It's a corner of 8th Avenue.
Okay.
And 34th Street. It's still there. And and after that, since I was active with the Bnei Akiva, I found out.
Were you active with Bnei Akiva in New York also?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I came right here and rejoined and
Where's
joined.
Bnei Akiva located here? Where'd you go?
The office was on 27th Street on the east side. Yeah. And it was not called, I remember, it was, at that point, it was not called Bnei Akiva yet. It had a different name. It was from Banativ. It became Bnei Akiva. Yeah.
So, the UN...
So anyway, through the organization, there was a farm called the Hachshara that was located in New Jersey, around Hightstown. And I joined the Hachshara, and weekends I would go out there, and I got to know people there. And my idea was through them that I would someday go to Israel. But at that time, I was 17 and so on. So, but I also met shlichim, and some of my friends who knew these shlichim, and they were looking for us to help the Haganah here. And they trusted us, knowing our background. So myself and another friend, Moshe Ginsburg, we worked indirectly for the Haganah.
What'd you guys do?
He and I collected weapons. The Haganah was looking for weapons here. And he was doing a lot of that, going around. I went with him on one trip where he would sit behind the wheel and I'd give me an address and go up. It was not the Haganah stopped it very soon because they found out that they were getting weapons that were useless, like samurai swords, pistols without ammunition. And there was one time when they stopped us from doing this because somebody had picked up some live grenades and had brought it to the port in Brooklyn. They stopped that. But I carried messages.
From who to who?
From they did not want to use the mail, did not want to use the phone. It was from the Breslin Hotel, which is on 27th Street here.
The what hotel? Breslin
Hotel. It was on 20. It's not a hotel. I think today it's saying. Today it's some kind of an apartment building. Up to 54th Street, where the Haganah had around the Copacabana. I don't know if in fact, on that street there was a sign today that the Haganah was there, and sometimes I would go there and bring a satchel. I didn't know what was in it. It was cash, and I brought that up. I didn't do it very often, maybe 2 or 3 times. They were concerned about using kids too, kids 17 underage. But in the meantime, I got to know the shlichim. And
do you remember any of the names of the shlichim? Do you remember them, or?
It'll come to me.
Okay.
There was one that was close, that I knew well. It doesn't come to me now.
It's okay. No, it doesn't matter.
But
so you're active. You're
in the meantime, I finished high school, and then in 1948, the war in Israel starts, and the state of Israel is declared.
So when Israel's declared, you're here.
I'm still here.
Okay.
And I wanted to volunteer. but as long as I'm underage, they wouldn't accept me. When the state was declared,
You're 18. You're 19.
No, 1940, in 1948. Yeah, I was.
19 years old.
Yeah, but September.
Yeah.
The state is declared in May.
Yeah.
In May, the state was declared. So I volunteered, and I went through several times. When I was on 27th Street, I volunteered, and I said I want to go, and they wouldn't accept me. They said we're concentrating on people that have military experience, right? One day I talked to the shaliach, and he asked me, well, if you go, you said Americans can't go, you know. They can't get passports for visas, no passport, to go to Israel because of the war. And they go to Europe. So he told me, how are you going to travel? You have no documents, you can't. So he asked me, where are your parents from? And I said, from Poland. So he said, from Poland? So I said, then you're Polish. I said, I don't know what I am. I'm not Polish. So he said, yeah. I said, you really want to go and volunteer? So I said, yes. And what will your parents say? So I said, I won't tell them. So I said, no, you got to tell them. You got to tell somebody in your family. So I said, okay. And so they sent me up at the prison, up to the doctor. There was a floor above. He examines me. It was just a short, he wants to see whether you have a pulse. And I was accepted, and then he said, he sends me to the Polish consulate here. And I said, what do I do? I can tell him. So he said, just give your name, and they're going to give you a Polish passport. Take pictures. He gave me, he gave me some pictures. And I went and I walked to the Polish consulate, which is right around here, 35th Street. I go to see the guy whose name he gave me, and he said, he said, Simon. I said, here, this is what you're looking for. And he gives me the Polish passport. I still have that passport. And it says occupation, husbandman. I didn't know what a husbandman is. I found out later, it's a farmer. So I've become a Polish farmer. And then they told me to,
did the Haganah pay him off?
July.
Did the Haganah pay him off? The Polish consulate?
I don't know. Maybe he was sympathetic. Maybe it was paid off. I didn't pay him. All I know is I went there and I picked up a Polish passport in my name.
Okay.
And so then I couldn't tell my parents. They told me, well, you'll be going to Israel very soon. When you come back here ready to go on this and this date. So when I showed up, I was put in a van with a bunch of other volunteers, and we were taken to a farm, like a hideout. Or?
Say goodbye to your parents?
No. I said goodbye to my uncle. My uncle Meyer, the one that was the one to first leave. And I told him, I went to his office, I told him what I was doing. And he said, I told him, don't tell my parents now because I don't want to have an issue with my father. I know my father, he'll go straight up to the organization and raise hell. You're stealing my son. So I said, you can't tell him. So I told my parents that I'm going upstate because their organization had camps, and this was in the summer. And I'm going up to a camp, and this is what I told them. Next time, well, in those days, you know, there was no email. Kids got 2 or 3 cards, postal cards, with stamps. The parents said, you know, every 2 weeks send me a postcard till I know you well. And that's what it was. So they had no way of knowing where I was. And
They picked you up in a truck.
it took me up to, it might have been Poughkeepsie, and it was upstate. And there were other volunteers there. And for a couple of days we got indoctrination. The indoctrination wasn't training, it was supposed to be, we did not train with weapons or anything. So it was indoctrination. It was learning about the country, the geography, the history. Why are we fighting? About something about the Arabs and the Arab mentality. When in battle with the Arabs, this is what you have to keep in mind. And things like, Arabs don't like to fight at night, so at night you have the advantage, these kinds of things. Whether that's true, I found out later that, it's all nonsense. Some Arabs fight at night, some don't. But it's just like Jews, some like and how different. And then a whole bunch of us who came down to the Marine Carp. The Marine Carp was the ship.
Marine Carp.
The Marine Carp. Right? There were 5 of us. Later on, I found out 2 of them were pilots. And I found out later on that they used my Polish passport to get on the ship. 2 pilots. And I found this out later on in Israel from people I knew. So that's how we left that's why I sailed to Israel. And when I arrived, the trip was 2 weeks. And when I arrived in Israel, I had joined the Bnei Akiva group. We had a group. And they were in kibbutz, stay somewhere in Stay Eliyahu, yes. Some to Ein Netziv, which is all near Tirat Tzvi. It was all a religious complex.
Yeah. And Emek Bet Shan.
And the Emek Bet Shan. I joined them there with a garin from Kfar Darom. Kfar Darom were the heroes who held back some 30 young teenagers who held back the entire Egyptian army in the Negev. And they were heroes, and we joined in with them to form an organization, Garin, that we knew eventually would settle in the south. But we weren't sure yet. They might go back to reestablish Kfar Darom. We weren't sure. From the Garin, I went into the army. I was posted in Tel Adara, on the Mishlet, which is south of Tirat Tzvi. South of the Tirat Tzvi, there weren't any fish ponds there, but it's in that area called Tel Adara.
What month did you arrive in Israel? What month?
August.
August 48.
August 48. Yes. August 1948. So I spent time with the next 4 months. Some with the Golani, with the 13th Battalion. It was all guard duty. There were lots of ceasefires at the time. There were 2 or 3 ceasefires. There was fighting for a couple of days, and then a ceasefire. The ceasefires, I believe, helped defend Israel. Not defend it, but save Israel. Because during those ceasefires, we weren't supposed to, but we trained, we brought in weapons, we planned. The Arabs were just sitting there in trenches. They didn't do anything. They were fighting amongst themselves as to who would be taking Tel Aviv, who's going to occupy. Abdullah was going to take Jerusalem. The Iraqis heard about these beautiful Jewish women in Haifa. We're going to come, and so they were sitting there dreaming. We were getting ready, and I was with my squad, which was changing over all the time, because we were mostly kibbutznikim. Kibbutznikim came. They were on duty, and they talked about neglecting their cows and chickens. It was a militia, the Golani in those days. Maybe the other brigades might have been too, but I know this was especially true for the Golani. And from time to time, at the end of a week of duty, went back to the kibbutz to shower, to change clothes, to eat. In between, we were doing patrols, ambushes, guard duty, and lots of hours and hours of guard duty. And the guard duty, many hated it. To me, it was very meaningful, except at night. But the guard duty during the day, I would look up from where we were in the Emek Bechan in the south, near Jenin, and look up, and I would look at the Gilboa, which is all the way in the back. And I remembered from the Bible, King Shaul died there fighting the Philistines. And I said, that happened 2,500 years ago. A Jewish king died there, and here I am, a Jew who's been through the Holocaust, and I'm sitting here guarding our ancestral homeland. And to me, this was always touching. Whether that made me a good guard, I don't know, because my mind was... But I was keeping my eyes open, my ears open, and I could see, because we were sitting on the heights. You'd have to be blind not to see the enemy approaching.
So you spent most of well, you came towards the end of the war, but you spent most of the time...
No, this was not the end of the war.
No.
No, I came in the heat of the war, the middle of the war, August. Don't forget, in June, it was July, the Egyptians were 20 miles away from Tel Aviv.
Sure.
They were going to walk into Tel Aviv at the time.
Sure. Where do you go after that?
I went to by the end of, I went back to the kibbutz. And in 1949, the Garin assembled. It was in October that we really seriously were fighting the Arabs. We kicked them out of the Galilee, liberated the Galilee. We kicked the Egyptians out of the Negev. And we were really, at that time, we had from 20,000 to maybe 30,000 maximum. We were now 100,000 soldiers trained. We were an army. And on when I came in August on the Mishlat, we didn't have any weapons. We had Stens and old British rifles. One or two of us had Enfields.
And then the weapons came from Czechoslovakia.
And then when the rifles came from Czechoslovakia, it was probably in October when we got them.
It was a tipping point.
My God, we were mad. I mean, we saw those crates. Coming to Tel Adara, there was no way to drive on a mule. There was a kibbutznik who brought us the case with the weapons. And they were all covered in grease because we took them out and cleaned them. And I picked up that rifle. And you know what was the first thing that I thought? That fat German in Antwerp, when he had his bayonet, his knife to my throat, my God, I could like to relive this moment right now when I had put that rifle in my hand. And to me, this was just amazing. Yeah, a week later we got the ammunition. We got rifles, but we didn't get any ammunition till then. And then the situation changed everywhere because we were getting the planes, the Messerschmitts, the Spitfires. We were attacking, and we kicked the Lebanese and the Iraqis and the Syrians out of the north, the Egyptians out of the south.
Where were you stationed towards this part? Were you still in the same area of the kibbutz?
I stayed in I was in the Bet Shan Valley.
In the Emek Bechan.
In the Emek Bechan, that's where I stayed. Now, after that, the Egyptians got kicked out.
Fallujah.
And, well, this was not Fallujah, but there was an area called Isdut. They had came as far as Isdut, 20 miles from Tel Aviv. And that's where we stopped them. And when in October, we kicked them out of there. And when they were kicked out of Isdut, 30 of us settled in the Isdut area, where the Egyptians had been. And we created the settlement.
Called?
And today it had different names. Today it's called Bnei Darom.
Bnei Darom?
Bnei Darom.
Bnei Darom.
It's near Ashdod.
So you settled there? In the Garin?
Yeah, we settled there. We were there, we created that.
During the war?
This was still during the war.
Yeah. B'nai Darom. What was it called when you got there?
B'nai Darom. I don't know what it was called, Nativot or Yavne.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it kept on changing names.
Okay.
It was not called B'nai Darom.
Was it Garina of Americans?
It wasn't Americans, South Africans,
Yeah.
and the original survivors of Kfar Darom.
And the original, right, who were missing.
And I have pictures. We went there and we prefabricated. We brought prefabricated walls. And I have a picture of me standing there, actually working and helping put up the walls of B'nai Darom. So I can say I was amongst the founders of B'nai Darom. Yeah. And those pictures I can show you. You won't recognize me, of course. Maybe you will. I look like a real kibbutznik with a cap and the whole thing.
And this whole time, your parents, do they know by now where you are?
Of course, yeah, by then they knew, because a month after I had arrived, I was I know it was September because it was my birthday. Yeah, a month after I had arrived, September, I went to see my aunt. I got leave to go see my aunt in Jerusalem.
And how was that?
And when she didn't know who I was when I walked into her flower store, and I told her who I was. So then she sent a telegram. At that time, everything, we used telegrams. That I was there. I came to them, and I'm well.
And that you're well.
And I'm well. My father never wrote to me, but my mother did. And they wrote to my aunt. You okay?
Yeah. They wrote to your aunt that you're...
Send me the message.
You end up in B'nai Darom. Is that where you end up, basically?
Yeah. So I ended up in B'nai Darom. Just about the same time, I decided that I stayed for a while with the kibbutz, but I decided that I wanted to have more of a private life. And shortly thereafter, I left the kibbutz.
Where'd you go to?
And I went to Tel Aviv, and I lived on my own. For a while, I did some beekeeping, because I knew somebody who did beekeeping, and stayed there for a while. And then I worked in Binyan, shoveling zivziv. And
the war's over by now?
By that time, the war is over, yes.
And did you get discharged from the army?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all got discharged at the time. And my father writes a letter, the first time I heard from him, and he's, oh no, I went to see my uncle in Jerusalem. And he said, so why aren't you in the kibbutz? I said, well, I love Israel. I want to stay in Israel. But I like more privacy.
Yeah.
And I discovered that,
kibbutz, it's not like that.
That the kibbutz is not like that. And my uncle, at the time there were new Olim Chadashim coming in, looking for work. And he said, what are you doing? What are you going to do in Israel? I said, well, I have several things I might possibly want to do. But what are you doing right now? I said, right now I'm shoveling sand for cement. So he looks at me and he said, do you know that there are people coming to this country who need that job, and you taking up a job of a person and taking away his livelihood? And I said, you're 19, you could be doing, you're smart, you're intelligent. You have a father in the United States who just wrote to me, come home, come back, and go to school, because I'll take care of all the expenses. What are you doing here? I said, you can always come back to Israel. Israel will always welcome you. You go and you come back with a profession so that you can help build the country. And it all makes a good sense. And that's how I returned to the United States. I returned to the United States with the idea that I was going to...
back one day.
I'm coming back one day.
Now tell me, you also were involved with Veterans of Israel, correct? Throughout the years?
With
Machal, Veterans of Israel.
With Machal, I've been affected, of course. I've been with Machal in Israel,
Yeah.
and American Veterans of Israel over here, where I've been a member for the past 40, 50 years. I was president twice, and I've been working with the organization all these years with the idea that we should tell people, we should pass our legacy to young people, to young Jews, and for them to know that they were Americans. And I was not an American, of course, but I was when I came. I wasn't Polish either. I wasn't Polish either. I was a typical Jew. I could have been a Cuban too, because I lived there 5 years.
Absolutely. Is there anything that we didn't, because I'm going to wrap up pretty soon, but is there something that we didn't touch that you feel that we need to talk about that we didn't talk about? Anything specific?
Well, we didn't talk about my own feelings. I wanted to go back to Israel. It really meant a lot to me. And I did try several times to get back, and I was working with a management consulting firm, working with Europe, in Europe, I helped establish them in Europe, and then I thought we'd try to do something in Israel. I tried, but it didn't work out. This was in the late 60s, early 70s. Israel was really not interested in ideas at the time. It was interested in money. And through contacts, I managed to talk to some people, officials of the Ministry of the Economy. And what I was told is, find people who want to bring money here, capital we need to build. It says, the knowledge we will acquire ourselves. But so it didn't work out. And I was very successful doing what I was doing. I was working for a major consulting company, working for big automotive companies like General Motors, improving their operations, profitability. I wanted to do that for Israeli companies, but it didn't work out. So in a way, that's been my disappointment. As far as going to Israel and helping create a state, to me, it's probably the most important achievement that I can think of. I feel so blessed and honored that I could be there at that time and see it and witness it. I wish I could put that. I remember how, even in those black days, when we didn't know whether we were going to win, we had no doubt that we would establish the state of Israel. We never thought it would be as what it is today. I mean, in terms of size. But we thought that certainly we would have a state between Haifa and Tel Aviv. But what happened is a miracle. It is a miracle. Some find it difficult to explain it to myself, except that, Ben-Gurion said it. If you want to get something done, you have to believe in miracles in Israel. So it's what I see happen in Israel today, the economy, the progress, an army that is one of the best in the world that could defend the country. I feel very proud of what I was honored to do, what I was privileged to do. Yet I was a kid, 19. I was 19. How much did I help?
Still 19.
How much did I help? How much did I help? How much difference did it make? Probably not much. But I remember Israelis telling me at the time, it's good that you are here. It's good to know that you guys care.
Yeah.
And I think this is the message that I would like to pass to the younger generation today, when they too fight for Israel, to do everything It's a disgrace when you hear about those kids in the colleges advocating the BDS, or all of a sudden they are so enamored with the Palestinians. Listen, the Palestinians were ready to kill us, and they almost did. They were so close to not having an Israel, and people don't recognize that. So I say, you know, stand by your people.
Sai, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I think we're done. Thank you. All right.
My pleasure.
Dad, oh my God, it's like watching a movie. Whew. I've been texting to the sisters every 10 minutes.